We'll start with Brian, our COVID-19 survivor.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Brian Tan. I am an occupational therapist currently working full-time in 2 rehabilitation centers at the Bronx and Westchester County. I moved to the US from Cebu, Philippines in 2002, and I have lived here since then. I have a loving wife, a 21-year-old daughter in college, and a 2-year-old son. I consider myself as a regular guy. Before the pandemic, I had established routines that included a 5-day work week as a licensed occupational therapist, and I cherished my weekends, which I spent with my family and friends. On March 1, the first case of COVID was reported in New Rochelle, a town next to where I work. The area later became the first containment zone in the country after a cluster of over 100 cases was identified. Large gatherings were prohibited and schools were closed, and over 100 cases. The National Guards were visible and there was a strange sense of anxiety around. As an essential healthcare worker, I continued to carry on with my daily tasks while keeping myself informed and following proper infection control precautions. There were daily briefings at my workplace in preparation of the outbreak. I had in-service training and we had protocols that were expected to follow. In the second week of March, one of my coworkers came down with a COVID-19. He was followed by another coworker and another coworker that by March 26, there were at least 4 in my team of occupational therapists and physical therapists with COVID. We think it might have been from a patient who came to our facility only to be returned to the hospital where he later died. There would be at least total of 10 cases and 2 deaths in my rehab team of OTs and PTs and rehab personnel. That day, there were over 30,000 cases and almost 300 COVID-related deaths in New York. I was about to be another COVID case. It was a Thursday on my way home from work when I developed a fever. At that point, I knew I had a COVID. I had almost expected it. I immediately called my wife and asked if I should stay in a hotel nearby. I was worried that I would get them sick. My wife, who is a physical therapist, insisted that I stay home in isolation in our son's bedroom. She said she would feel better knowing that she can keep an eye out on me. It was difficult for us because as a family, we felt that it was important to be together. For the first few hours, I remained calm and positive. If it was only the fever that I have to deal with, I thought to myself, I could handle it. I was committed to remain at home in isolation for the next 14 days at the advice of my doctor. That evening, I had a fever of 105. I was exhausted but rested and slept through the night. By the next morning, I woke up feeling better despite having a temperature of 100.3. Within few hours, I started to feel tightness in my chest. And this was not like asthma. It was as if there is an indescribable heavy weight on my chest that prevented me from breathing. I tried my best to stay calm by distracting myself. But when the tightness became so intolerable and excruciating, I asked my wife to call 911. When the paramedics arrived, I felt relieved and afraid at the same time. Relieved because to me, they were like angels, but I'm afraid as well because by them taking me, it might be the last time that I would see my family. And as I left, I looked back at my wife and it broke my heart to see her crying. We were not able to hug like normally we do when we are sad. And a while, I could not tell her that I'll be back for sure. Instead, I told her that everything will be just fine. And as I have wheeled into the emergency room, I felt a real sense of fear. The waiting room was crowded with at least 50 people, all seemingly afraid and like me with COVID. One was very sick. I saw her being intubated. It was frightening to imagine going through the same. I started praying and kept my faith. Then I received IV fluids, a few tests, a chest x-ray, and was informed that I did not have any infection. I went home fever-free and chest pain-free. But I had mixed emotions about going home. I was happy because I knew I would see my family, but I was worried because I was uncertain of what was going to happen. On Monday, I received a call from the hospital. There was a mistake in how they read my test result. There was something about my white count that suggested that there's a possible infection. I returned to the ER and did another test. It confirmed what I really knew. And because I did not need any oxygen, I was discharged home. I felt much better and was confident that I had a mild case and will be fine in a few days. However, one day later, I started to feel increased chest tightness and again went back to the ER. And these trips to the emergency room happened to be a few more times. And each time, the wait felt longer and longer and the ride to the hospital grimmer and grimmer. The road to the hospital was dark and eerie, and I would find myself alone with my thoughts. It was sometimes hard to think pleasant thoughts. Dying alone was an idea that was worse than dying itself. But there were moments that gave me time to think about life and what's important to me. I thought about my young son, my daughter, and my wife. But somehow I felt guilty seeing all of the other patients around me who were much older and frailer. And the ER staff was overwhelmed with patients, and while I thought I might not be as sick as everyone else, I did not know that for sure. It was the longest 14 days of my life, but finally I had tears in my eyes and was overjoyed that at that moment when I got to hug and kiss my wife for the first time and my son as well. So I hugged them so tight I did not want them to let go. I was overwhelmed with gratitude to God who gave me the gift of life and love at that time. And throughout those 2 weeks, I endured the illness through anxiety and fear. I did not have moments of feeling helpless, but I was never hopeless. Every morning when I wake up, I thank God for letting me breathe again. And during my hardest moments and nights in fear, I tried to motivate myself to reach that 14th day, which offered me the hope that I will defeat this virus. Of all the most uplifting moments in my whole experience was the unexpected outpouring of support that I received from my parents, my family, friends, relatives, co-workers, and even distant relatives and friends. They all kept me company despite the physical isolation. They took a time and effort to call me. They sent messages of prayers each day. Even my high school peers created a group chat. Those gestures gave me strength and courage to recover. And it's been a month since I came down with COVID. And while I have not been able to recover completely, I know I healed spiritually. And this pandemic had taught me more about myself than I ever thought I would. And it is in this experience that I realize what matters most to me. Thank you.
It's an incredible story, Brian, and congratulations on your recovery from a very trying time for you and your family. And what we heard you say was a mix of emotions, acceleration of symptoms, imperfect protocols, guilt, together with strength, courage, and gratitude. And so thank you really for making the effort and being with us today.
Thank you.